I have a problem. It's a stupid problem, and it's my fault. I'm in the habit of saying we when referring to the collective, and on most trips it is we, but this one is squarely my fault, so I've just got to own it. Basically, I've overfaced myself. We've been visiting ancient sites all over Europe and beyond into Africa and Asia. It's all been very exciting, and a lot of that has been the fuel for the episodes on this channel. But not long after we started making travel episodes, it became apparent that the real story was all these ancient places we were visiting. In fact, probably in the first year, we realised that what we really wanted to be making was history content. However, once you start catching Islamic sites from around Al-Andalus, or Byzantine churches from the eastern half of the Mediterranean, or Neolithic stones that pop up everywhere from Ireland to Switzerland to Spain, suddenly our to-do list was getting way the hell out of control. We joked about this in our Venetian episodes, a series which not only remains half-released to this day, but we paused it precisely because we still had some sites left that we hadn't caught in Albania and Greece. By the way, I know this episode's supposed to be about driving to Scotland. Stick with us a minute. So all of these lists of things to see on top of everything we'd already filmed, at time of writing, we have over 10 terabytes from trips both in the UK and beyond, and then an additional 8 terabytes just from UK historical sites and landscapes. If our house ever gets raided by the police, they're probably going to assume I've been hacking the Pentagon or something with all the hard drives I've got piled up. You've got to save everything twice in case one bricks and you lose it all. So, while it's nice to have a big project to work on, it both figuratively and very literally gets me out of bed in the morning, it feels borderline ridiculous that some of the largest of these series are still going to need 4 to 5 years to complete. That's partly a money thing too. Getting to Algeria or Armenia, to name 2 examples, is pretty expensive compared to where we normally end up, like Croatia or Italy and so on. Now, since starting YouTube, we've made friends with other channels, and I've always been inspired by the guys at Small Adventures. They're based in Aberdeenshire, and they do all sorts from stone circles and hill forts to mountains and lochs, and it's all incredibly wholesome and chill. And by the way, they are way undersubbed. So look, don't take my word for it. Please pause this and go and sub to them. I'm genuinely going to put on some hold music while you do. Right, well, now I've lost half the audience who clicked on this to begin with. The main thing Small Adventures excels at is regular uploads. In fact, for the month of December, they put out 20 videos in the time it took us to publish 2. So, to break out of my usual habit of episodes going on the shelf for actual years at a time while I work through our backlog, I've decided to drop this in without it being part of any series or dovetailing into other episodes somehow. You already know what it is from the thumbnail, and to keep it trim, that's enough preamble. I'll explain as we go. So, it is the dead of winter. In fact, it's January 2nd, which is in that post-Christmas miasma. And Christmas this year had seemed even more grey than ever. We decided we'd take a big roll of the dice and head to the Lake District. The weather might have been okay, or it might have been absolute filth, but it's a change of scene. So, we got on the road for 7:35, which, with a baby under a year strapped in the back, that's not bad going. Road footage is always pretty hit and miss, and since I'd undertaken to drive it, it left Jen to try and catch some shots from the passenger seat while also keeping Junior happy. As it happened, there was an icy chill, but the sort you get on beautiful blue sky days like this. Given that we were only 12 days from the shortest day of the year, we didn't have a lot of light to work with, so we didn't want to spend too much time in the south. Anything in a 2-hour radius of us would be much better served for another day. However, couldn't resist a small tradition we've developed on our road trips. If you're on the A34, which is pretty much the main road Winchester to Oxford, and we're usually on it if we're heading north at all or even heading to Bristol or Wales, there's multiple service stations, but to actually have somewhere nice to stop, if you take a small diversion to the village of Whitchurch, this is Kudos Coffee. I continue to be so grateful this place is here. We go there pretty much any excuse we get, and the margins on running an independent coffee spot are pretty razor thin, so please follow our example and support these guys. You'll be doing yourself a favour rather than just sitting in the glum interior of a welcome break, and it always just makes my day going there. Okay, not a lot of footage for the next leg, as we were trying to make some progress, and Junior was not feeling sitting in the car seat multiple hours at a time. We were passing, a lot of places we've done before. For example, the instantly recognisable Beacon Hill, which is this gorgeous figure-8 hill fort that overlooks the A34, and a short way opposite, Ladle Hill, a hill fort that has famously remained unfinished, which makes for a bit of an interesting case study. But this is supposed to be a more compact episode, so we're not going to drag in other bits. We had to take a quick pause at this rest stop, and yes, it was getting more frosty as we made more progress north. At length, we dropped in on Sandbach. I've heard people saying Sandbach as opposed to Sandbach. I don't know. Now, while you can stop off at these places if you want, I'm not really suggesting that you copy our itinerary. For a bit of context, all of that filming we mentioned has left our map of the UK looking like this. Blue for done, green to do, and a couple of other categories. So suffice to say, a lot of the major things, castles, Roman sites, and the more major Neolithic bits have already been ticked off. So the choices we made for this trip were kind of some ticking off things that we hadn't done, and that includes these. These are the Sandbach crosses, the cross part conspicuously missing, yes. They had in fact been broken into a bunch of pieces and spread over a large area, so they had to be reassembled, but in 1816 they were put back together. I wish I could say I'd planned for this, and yes, sometimes if time allows, I do try and figure out the angle of the sun and time of day that the subject will be best lit. There's no point going if the only angle you can see is pointing directly into the sun. Your footage will just look like trash. But in this case, down to pure fluke, the light could not have been more perfect. The low winter sun at about 20 past 12 lighting the crosses exquisitely. So that felt great. We just had time for a macchiato and a toasty from this place, just called The House, which was pretty lovely, but we couldn't stick around. We were still only slightly over halfway, and if we were going to make it to Scotland in the light on one of the shortest days of the year, it was going to be tight. Again, don't have road footage for this next bit. You're not missing a huge amount. Don't fret. It's a motorway. The M6 is nice in parts, but anyway, the next stop, again, not necessarily a recommendation. This is the village of Langton. It's just on the outskirts of Lancaster, and it's only 3 minutes off the M6. Paradoxically, having just had the perfect light for Sandbach, the conditions for this next one, pretty much the opposite of what you want. In the churchyard of St Wilfrid's, another ancient cross, but it's set in amongst the trees, so the outline doesn't really pop as a subject, and it's in shadow, so the light's not great. Best thing was to catch some of the individual panels and some nice details here. You can see the outline of the horse there. This is actually one of those rarest things, a monument that could be accurately described as Viking. Dating from the early 900s, it depicts the legend of Sigurd, but then elsewhere on the cross there's also Christian imagery, so a bit of a mix there. Now look, I'm not expecting people to get too excited about these very old crosses. I know, this is a bit niche. Blame it on Twitter. I spent enough years on there to be exposed to increasingly specific areas of British heritage to the point that I'm getting in the car and driving nearly an hour just to see some ditches and a few barrows. Yeah, true story. December was slightly slim pickings for suitable filming days. Oh, by the way, since we mentioned it, follow us on Bluesky. We're having a much better time there than on what is now the Muskrat Hell site. But Halton isn't just a Viking cross. It also has this rather lovely Motte and Bailey surviving. I say surviving, the earthworks, that is. The wooden buildings, about 800-900 years late on that one. As we pulled away, got some slightly better road footage compared to the rest of the day. Now, I realise we've just taken it as a given that, driving to Scotland in a day, that's what we're doing. But there's a little more to it than that. You see, I briefly mentioned we were actually doing a long weekend in the Lake District, and so this around here would pretty much represent the finish line. So, how's about it? Well, as it happens, this was something I put on a list a couple of years ago now. I made a list of things I really wanted to do before I turned 40. Hey, being a spry lad of 22, I've got plenty of time on my hands, but here, actually, I've realised that gag doesn't really work because I rarely show my face on these episodes, so no one actually knows what I look like. Suffice to say, 22 was not recently. Anyway, one of the things on that list was drive to Scotland. I know this doesn't sound like it belongs in a bucket list. It's one of the easier items on the list, which, bear in mind, is 30 deep. And I mean, you, on the spot, come on, 30 things you want to do before you're 40. And chop chop. But yeah, it's just one of those things. When you're growing up in somewhere like Chichester, like right on the south coast, if you suggested that to your parents, they'd probably shake their heads and say, no, that's not a great idea. That's not really a thing that you do. And for what it's worth, the crucial context here is I wrote this list a while before I could drive or had passed my test. So the meta implication of this were really much more learn to drive, pass your test and get a license, and then drive to Scotland in a day, which is, a bit more of an achievement. Anyway, in its own small way, I just wanted to be able to tick this off the list and say, yes, I started from my house, which, if we were any further south, I'd be a drowned corpse in the English Channel, and drove all the way to Scotland in just the one day. So our race to beat the light, as you can see, it was getting a little bit tight. Sunset was even earlier than I realised, at 3:56, and it was going to be down to a handful of minutes if we'd make it before sundown. So at length, Carlisle was coming up, bridge over the Esk with the very last of the sunset, and then all of a sudden, and it's not a long shot, not wanting to slow down and cause a motorway accident, but here's the sign. We're in Gretna Green at 3:52, stop the clock and sound a Scottish-themed klaxon. Yeah, to really make a proper job of it, we exited the motorway, and here's a cute place. It's called the Old Acquaintance Cairn. Yeah, light wasn't great for this, but it's rather nice. Reminiscent of the other cairns you find going back into prehistory, this modern cairn was actually set up around the independence vote around 10 years ago to symbolise unity between parts of the UK, and people brought stones to add to the pile. There's also a little place where you can just sneak that much better shot of the Scotland sign. Does this count as a low-angle flag shot? I guess. Geography nerds will already know that we did cross at the most southerly point of the England-Scottish border. If we'd resolved to cross Northumberland and, say, cross the Tweed, yeah, you're not managing that in the light on a winter's day, or at least not without holding off having a piss for the best part of 8 hours. Still, was feeling great. And while we didn't explore Gretna properly, bear in mind, we did still have a baby who'd been in the car almost the entire day, we did drop in on this retail park down the road, and this was just ludicrously lovely. In fact, a lot better than anything Bournemouth had to offer. Yeah, for the first time, I actually did feel a bit Christmassy. On the 2nd of January. And I'm not too proud to say it, I got a Costa. Actually, maybe I am too proud. It kind of hurt to admit that on camera. Anyway, that's us wrapping up for this one. Having said in the intro, I wanted to try a different type of episode that isn't daisy-chained into a much bigger series. Can't lie, I actually broke off this one day, which I didn't initially think of as an episode in itself, from a larger episode in the Lake District, which is part of a series we're filming as we speak. When it's going out, well, maybe 8 months plus, probably, that's the current plan. So I can't really claim to be a changed man. In fact, looking at the runtime, not really sure I've caught the breezy, chilled wholesomeness of Small Adventures either. Their whole thing is doing small, manageable episodes, and looking at the timestamp, this has ballooned, as everything always does. However, once again, big shout outs to Small Adventures. Please do continue to show their channel some love. They're in that pre-1K sub place where even though you're making great stuff, the platform still treats you like you don't matter, which is kind of disheartening. However, while we're talking about things ballooning, one of those projects with a gestation greater than that of an African elephant, no, I mean entirely literally, we've been filming these for nearly 5 years now. One of those series, which is at like the 99% progress bar ready for broadcast, I couldn't resist sneaking in a trailer at the back of this episode, so please, we're not quite done, but enjoy this. So yes, a mammoth series on hill forts and the Iron Age of Britain is finally going live this year. It's taken us to every corner of the country, and yet we're still rushing around trying to bag sites right up until the deadline, but that's coming very soon. In the meantime, if you've been enjoying the music in this episode, it's ours. We create all the music for these episodes, and you can find it on bandcamp.com. If you want to support the channel, that's the place to do it. We already mentioned finding us on the socials. If you want to see what we're doing day to day, that's a good place for that. And next time, we'll be back with an episode that's completely unrelated to this, but otherwise, we'll catch you very soon.